I don't want to be a wealthy white person living in a 30% white America. I'm willing to accept maybe a less cozy life in terms of living in the city and a larger house and all this other stuff if it meant living exclusively around white people. Maybe I'm willing to make that trade, which was one of the subjects of conversation. Nick had the feedback for Arvel that, listen, if you want people to buy into what you're doing, you have to make it very attractive. And the trappings of the material world in especially urban locations, big cities, there's a lot of attractive components of that life. All of the food, all of the nightlife, all of the entertainment. Now, as Christians, we are highly aware that we shouldn't get sucked into those things, but we don't necessarily have to live like monks either. It is nice to be able to go to a fancy five-star restaurant or to go and experience some amazing piece of architecture, to go out to some marina, these things that places of the country that have had hundreds of millions of dollars invested in them over time, they've been able to build some pretty nice amenities. And right now, those are not obviously exclusively white territories. And so you kind of make that trade where, well, I do want to enjoy certain finer establishments. I'm going to have to accept being around some diversity. And so Nick's feedback to Arvel was, I understand there's limited resources to do this currently, but in those intentional communities, you need to have magnets. And it has to be a magnet that is larger than you don't have to deal with diversity. That is a huge selling point. We all understand that. But the magnet has to be partially economic that, hey, if you're going to give up your life over there, you need to be able to enjoy a pretty high standard of living there too, over there in Return to the Land, the Ozarks, or if it's in Missouri or wherever else. You need to enjoy, as I said, the comfort of life that is hopefully at parity or at least pretty close over there. Both the physical home you're living in and the access to public amenities and entertainments and arts and so on. We got to build those things up in those territories so that you have a stronger sales pitch for people to want to leave behind the New York Cities, the Los Angeleses, the Chicago's, for example, with Nick living in Chicago. And that is going to be something that is a long term endeavor because to do architecture at that scale, the required technology to roll out things of that scale, the financial reserves required to attract great talent, concerts of people who are morally aligned, stuff like that. You need financial backing for that. So that ties into the parallel economy we discussed before and some of the difficulties white advocacy runs into with the lack of funding. But these things are, in my opinion, inevitable.